Bank. Eberhard Kuhnheim, who is the chairman of the supervisory board of BMW, the Asia part, former prime minister of Thailand, former president of the Philippines, Fidel Ramos, and at one point also the former prime minister of South Korea was on their board, a man named Mr. Park, who used to head up the largest steel company in South Korea.
The list just goes on and on and on. So these guys carry a tremendous amount of influence, and they are able to predict trends in global markets, predict trends in political shifts, and in some ways, and this is the sort of the most insidious part, and if you want to be cynical about the Carlyle Group, you have to be concerned about their ability to influence these trends and actually affect change in government policy, which would positively affect their investments.
Former government officials tended, before Carlyle, to go to academic institutions, or they tended to, some just retired, or many of them became lobbyists. Well, for someone like Jim Baker, who really had been at the pinnacle of American power for over 10 years, he'd been chief of staff, he'd been secretary of the Treasury, ultimately secretary of state. For Jim Baker to be a lobbyist or even to be a lawyer was not something that was terribly interested in him.
If you're a Republican during a Democratic administration in the White House, for example, someone like James Baker, you're able to revolve out of the White House into the Carlyle Group, work there for a period of time, and then when that Democratic administration is through, like Clinton's was through in 2000, you're able to revolve right back into the White House. Colin Powell did that. Colin Powell did a little consulting for the Carlyle Group. He knows the guys very well. He knows Frank Carlucci very well. Frank Carlucci was his mentor as he came up through the ranks. And I think his relationship with the Carlyle Group personifies the gray area that the Carlyle Group works within. Some of these guys are never officially hired. You know, some of them are only put on retainer. Some of them are paid in very ambiguous ways, like through investments that they make through the Carlyle Group or the amount of money that they help raise, that kind of thing. So it's never really clear at any given time who exactly is working for the Carlyle Group. No one really knows unless, you know, they officially... Unless the Carlyle Group wants you to know. If the Carlyle Group wants you to know, then they put them up on the website and they put them in their brochures and that kind of thing. But if you look on the Carlyle website today, you don't see George Bush Sr.'s name anywhere, although he is working for the Carlyle Group. George Bush Sr. is a fundraiser. He is the kind of guy who can go into Kuwait or Saudi Arabia, where they love him, pack the house, and get these guys to open up their wallets and give money to the Carlyle Group. That's his role. But if you look in over the history of this company, George Bush Sr. has clearly met with business leaders one-on-one, met with political leaders in South Korea and in Saudi Arabia, and that would lead one to believe that he's doing much, much more than just giving speeches for the Carlyle Group.
I got a call one day from Carlyle after I blasted them in the papers, and they said that maybe we should get together and talk. We had breakfast at the Mayflower Hotel. Everything was going just fine. We were eating our eggs and bacon and talking about the weather, and then somewhere in the middle to the late part of the meal, he said, "How come you're trashing former President Bush?" And he said, "He's a very, very good, decent man, and you know, I think it's really unfair what you've been doing about former President Bush." And I said, "Well, you know, all you have to do is tell the world what exactly he's doing for you." And I said, "What is he doing for you? And what's his position there? How much money did he make last year?" And he said, "Well, I can't tell you how much he made. Has no official position." And I said, "Yes, he does. He was the head of your business council in Asia. Last I checked, he still is." And he goes, "Well, that's just an advisory post." And he said he just gives speeches. And I go, "How much does he get a speech?" And I said, "I heard it's well over $100,000 every time he opens his mouth." And I said, "So if it's just a few speeches, why don't you just tell us where and when and how much? And then people like me will go away." And he said, "Well, that's not possible."
George Bush Sr. made it after he left the presidency. He was working for Carlyle and made several swings through East Asia, going to Thailand, going to South Korea and other places, sort of looking for investment opportunities for Carlyle. And Carlyle finally settled on South Korea And then the way that overlaps with policy is during the Asia crisis, the International Monetary Fund came in with this rescue package for South Korea that the United States backed, and the U.S. used the IMF crisis to push through deregulation and changes in rules around foreign ownership, the changes that they'd been unable to press through, maybe 25 or 30 years of trade policy. In a matter of months, under this IMF package, they just rammed all these changes through. And one of the changes was allowing foreign banks to take ownership shares, controlling shares of Korean banks. And so Carlyle has been right in there, and they've bought one of the largest banks there, commercial banks. And so you can say that, Bush Sr. didn't cut the deal, but when someone comes of that stature, that gives a kind of stamp of approval for people wondering who this investment group is. They say, well, it's backed by the former president of the United States, and it carries a lot of weight.
I have said that it's the worst kind of conflict of interest, particularly when your son is the president of the United States. So while Junior is talking to heads of state about war and other weighty matters, Papa is talking to them or having conversations with them about Carlyle, and it's just, I find it disgusting.
Carlyle bought United Defense, which is one of the largest military contractors in the country, in 1997, and they went on to work with United Defense on a very specific program called the Crusader. The Crusader is a huge howitzer. It's a mobile gun, but it came under fire by a defense panel that was paid to review the all defense purchases of the Pentagon.
One fateful day, we were having a hearing on the upcoming defense authorization legislation, which is going to authorize almost an unprecedented amount of money for defense spending, $400 billion.
After September 11th, huge defense money was unearthed.
Our men and women deserve the best weapons, the best equipment, and the best training. And therefore, I've asked Congress for a one-year increase of more than $48 billion for national defense, the largest increase in a generation.
The defense panel looked at the Crusader weapon in 1998, and they determined that it was too big and too slow for the modern-day warfare that the United States was likely to engage in, and the panel recommended that the gun contract be terminated.
We need to be agile and mobile, and therefore we need to replace aging aircraft and get ready to be able to defend freedom with the best equipment possible.
Members of the Pentagon had come and testified on Capitol Hill and said, no. We don't want the Crusader because it doesn't fit in with our priorities. But as a part of that $48.1 billion increase in the $400 billion defense request that came down from the president, inside there was money for the Crusader missile. So then I started doing my research, and I learned that the Crusader missile was manufactured by United Defense Industries, and that company was owned by the Carlyle Group, and that the president's father was on the payroll of the Carlyle Group. And I said to myself, now, in all of the ethics briefings that we've had in Congress, this is something that we're supposed to stay away from in our own personal conduct.